There's a Filipino term where Filipinos would say, pupulitin ka sa kangkungan. Now literally what that means is you will be picked in a kangkung field. And you got to understand kangkung is sort of known to be fairly a low status food, like it's cheap, it grows anywhere, so kangkungan is not a great place to be picked from. So you might say, kung hindi ka mag-aral na mabuti, pupulitin ka sa kangkungan. Hi mga kabano, it's Chris here bringing you food and fun from the Philippines. So today we're going to talk about 5 of the most commonly used Filipino veggies. Filipinos love to eat, diba? They eat 5 to 6 to 7 or 8 times a day. There's fiestas, there's Christmas parties, and every time you go over to your tita's house to be like, hey, gapa. Now, you are what you eat, right? That's a really important phrase. They say that a lot about nutrition, you are what you eat. And here in the Philippines, if that were true, then the average Filipino would literally be like half rice and half baboy. Like, as in a mythical creature that is a half a rice and half a pig, that would be known as the Filipino. Now, that's perhaps a stereotype, that's an unfair stereotype, because Filipinos occasionally do eat a vegetable, and you can check out my show on Filipino vegetarian dishes that aren't really vegetarian here to see what I mean. But today I actually want to talk to you about some of the unsung heroes of Filipino cuisine, which is the Filipino vegetables. And I love cooking with Filipino vegetables because there's some really interesting stuff there, especially if you're a foreign chef dito sa Pilipinas. And I'm going to tell you a bit about them and show you how they're used in making some delicious Filipino recipes, and then you can decide, mga kabano, whether you make vegetarian is not really vegetarian, or if you just want to stay being a pork and rice eating Filipino. Now first on the list today is of course the ampalaya, or in English we would call this one the bitter gourd. So ampalaya originated in India and was then subsequently brought from there to China and reached the Philippines by way of the early days of trade between China and the Philippines, which dates back to before the Spanish colonial period. And for the uninitiated, what is an ampalaya? Ampalaya, or bitter gourd, is known for its bitter taste. Now it looks like sort of a wrinkled green phallus. If you had to describe it in a nutshell, that's what you would say. Like kind of like a cucumber maybe, but like more wrinkly. And ampalaya is really delicious when it's cooked. If you just eat it on its own, it's going to be pretty disgusting. So don't go out and buy an ampalaya and just bite into it and be like, oh, this doesn't taste good, because it's not going to taste particularly good if you just bite it. The art of ampalaya is really in the preparation and then what you cook with it. What I mean there is typically if you're going to cook ampalaya in a relatively simple dish, you would definitely want to first slice it in half, remove the seeds, and then slice it thinly and salt it. And that salting will sort of leach out a lot of the liquid and bitterness of your ampalaya prior to cooking. Now, ampalaya is really easy to grow. So I grow this at home at the moment. Dito sa rooftop ko, meron ko isang sapayan, like a drying cage where I dry my clothes. And I actually have ampalaya growing out the pots there. So it grows really, really, really well in the urban environment for any urban gardeners out there. And you just need to have a trellis for it to grow up because it's a climbing vine. So it'll take off and then it'll start to shoot ampalayas, and you'll get maybe, 5 or 6 off a good plant. So I haven't tried it, but actually you can make an ampalaya soup, like a bitter ampalaya broth. And I've had that and it feels very restorative. Like you sip it and you're like, oh, this is so bitter, but it just feels like, that feeling when you drink like kale juice or something, that your whole body just feels a lot more restored and invigorated, like you're having something really healthy. That's what that tastes like. So try that out sometime at home. Some dishes that you can use this in. So the most simple is to just make ampalaya itlog. So you do need to salt the ampalaya for that. And that's like a really, really simple, fast way of cooking ampalaya, and surprisingly delicious to have. Like, I don't know any other culture that has like an egg dish with some bitterness in it from a vegetable like that. You can also try it in mongo. So I find with mongo, it really elevates the dish, especially when you have your kalabasa for sweet, your ampalaya for bitterness, and then you have some like salty danggit or something, the crispy fried danggit. That's super sarap way to have ampalaya as well. So my next one on this introduction to our common Filipino vegetables is kangkong. Kangkong is water spinach. It's very common across Southeast Asia, though it has its origins in India. In the Philippines, this has been growing here for centuries, but I think it was really popularized during the American period, where they were actually growing it in the trenches alongside a lot of the rice fields. It grows very fast, so it has these really long stems that can get up to 2 or 3 meters long. So there's 2 ways you can grow your kangkong. You can actually grow this in water itself, hence it's known as a water spinach, where it literally just grows on the water and spreads out over the water. or you can grow it in very, very moist and wetted soil. So here at home, I normally grow mine in the soil, but it takes a lot of water and it grows really fast with heaps of water. So a couple of things you can do with kangkong. I find it's like best served as a side dish. So often when you have some grilled seafood or pork, which is amazing here in the Philippines, then you have your kangkong, quite simple on the side to add some nutrition to the meal. So typically simple preparations like adobong kangkong work well, or even just simply steaming it and then maybe stirring through a little bit of garlic and oil, or a bit of bagoong might be another way that this can be prepared as a side dish. When using it in a main ulam, it normally goes into soups. So typically things like sinigang, you can use kangkong, and my favorite sinigang to make is actually sinigang with salmon belly, and I always put kangkong in that because it's like a really light take on sinigang. I do it with calamansi, and then I just want a few leaves of kangkong floating through for the visual effect and hint of bitterness that it adds to the broth. There's a Filipino term where Filipinos would say, "Pupulitin ka sa kangkongan." Now literally what that means is you will be picked in a kangkong field. And you got to understand kangkong is sort of known to be fairly a low status food. Like it's cheap, it grows anywhere. So, talagang that's the food of the mamamayang Filipino, yung mga mahihirap dun sa bukid kung halimbawa. They're the ones who are eating kangkong the most, right? Because it grows widely available. So kangkongan is not a great place to be picked from. So you might say, kung hindi kang mag-aral na mabuti, pupulitin ka sa kangkongan. That might be something that you like tell your kids, you're gonna like grow up to be a kangkong and just get harvested. Like, what are you sa buhay? That's the kangkong idiom. If you know any other kangkong idioms, please leave them below. I'm always interested to hear yung mga itong quirk ng Filipino wika. So next on my list today is, of course, taro leaves, or in the Philippines, they're known as dahon ng gabi. Not to be confused with dahon ng gabi, which would be the leaves of night, or magandang gabi, bayan. Now, taro leaves, it looks like a sort of a long stalk with quite a big heart-shaped leaf. And they normally grow in swampy or very muddy, wet soils in the tropics. Now, originated again in India most likely, moved to the Malay Peninsula, and then continued to spread east throughout the Philippines. So it's grown very widely, and it's an interesting plant because in addition to the leaf itself, you can also eat the root of gabi. So the gabi plant, that is taro, and taro is used in a lot of cooking. Now the leaves, they need to be dried first, and this is one which the plant has a slight toxicity that can cause an itchiness when being consumed. So taro leaves are known for having this sort of chemical agent in them called dagta, which is nakakamakati, or causes an itchy reaction when you eat it. And the way to eliminate that is through the process of drying. So you'll see if you go to the palengke here in the Philippines that there's these big taro leaves. They'll be hanging in the market and they're drying them out, and then they're going to sort of shred the leaves into thin shards of dried taro leaf, which can then be used in cooking. The taro root itself is a really great vegetable that I like to throw into sinigang, and when I make pork sinigang, I like to actually put in some taro leaves and go for a more thick starchy broth, and as it starts to break down in the boiling, it'll just make the whole soup really a bit more thick and robust. The thing that I do more than anything with taro leaves is, of course, making laing, and I love it because if you've never had taro leaves before, it's just a really amazing taste. And the key to making a great laing is to balance that slight bitterness of the taro leaves with a little bit of sweet shrimp. So I try to find the sweetest, most succulent shrimp I can to put in there, just to give it a hint of sweetness from that. You have your coconut milk, you put in bagoong for the salt, and it just comes together into this really, really interesting dish. It's like bitter and earthy, and then creamy and slightly oily from the coconut milk that goes in, and then slightly spicy if you're making it proper bicol style. Now, if you can't get your own leaves, then it's actually quite easy, I've found, to buy dried taro leaves in Asian stores, Asian grocery stores. I've seen them certainly in Australia. I'm sure it's in the US as well. You just go in there and ask for the taro leaves, and they'll normally have them in bags of these dried, shredded looking green leaves. So do try this one out. All right, so next vegetable that you must know if you want to cook Filipino food is sitaw, or snake beans. The sitaw, or snake beans, it's an indigenous plant to Southeast Asia, so grown very, very widely across the region. They can grow up to 1 meter long, and I love this as a plant because it is so easy to grow at home. Since I was about 6 years old, palagi ko may beans sa garden dun sa Australia. We used to grow dwarf beans that grow into shrubs, little bushes. When you're growing a snake beans though, you need to have trellises because they're gonna climb, and they'll climb for a really long way. Like you might need 6 meters or so for the average plant. And then after about just 4 or 5 weeks from planting, they're already starting to become a productive vine, and you're starting to get these beautiful long snake beans. Now you can let them grow up to a meter with a really productive, well-supported, well-nourished plant. When I'm home growing, I like to pick them maybe 40, 50 centimeters when they're still a little bit thinner, and I actually don't mind eating them raw. It tastes delicious actually when you have them raw, but they also benefit from just some very, very light steaming, and you know the difference when you have them straight off the vine. Honestly, if you have them within 2 hours of picking, it's just a totally different vegetable to when you buy in the palenque, where it's like looking a bit old, where they've let it grow too long because they want more mabigat for the weight, right? So definitely try growing this at home. It's another one that's perfect for any urban gardeners here in Manila. Now some of the delicious things you can make with it, of course, it can be adoboed like everything. So you make adobong sitaw. I really love it just with simple ground pork, making something like giniling pork with sitaw, lots and lots of sitaw. You can also add it to yung mga soups katulad ng sinigang, and it's one of the vital vegetables that you would use in cooking a good kare-kare. So it's used in a lot of different ways and flavors, and I guess it's not a hugely powerful flavored ingredient, so it's very versatile, and it's going to just add to the healthiness and the tastiness of whatever you're cooking. And the last vegetable I'm going to tell you about today is sayote. Sayote is a vegetable that comes from the gourd family, along with things like melons and cucumbers and squash. And this one was brought to the Philippines during the Spanish colonial period. It's sort of a pear-shaped looking, light green, and it's kind of a hard outside skin with then a more pale flesh inside. Now it's quite hard obviously when it's raw, so this one you do need to steam or saute in order for it to soften to the point that it's easily consumable for humans. And it's quite a neutral flavor, so I find in cooking this is one talagang importante na i-combine mo with a flavorsome form of cooking where it's going to really kind of soak up the flavors of what it's in. Sayote is known as the poor man's papaya, which I always find is a very curious expression because papaya is not particularly expensive here in the Philippines. But say you're making tinola and you can't afford the green papaya, the small green papayas that are still unripe. Sayote is actually cheaper. And I mean, we're talking about 10, 15 pesos a kilo you can get sayote for in the province. Like I can buy 3 kilo packs for 50 pesos up in Tagaytay. Whereas your papaya might be around like 30, 40 a kilo. So there's not a lot in it by modern world standards, but it is one of the cheapest vegetables you can cook with. And if you need to feed an army of people, then sayote is a great choice. Now sayote requires a lot of space in your garden, and that's because it's sort of a climbing, rambling plant. For that reason, in the Philippines, it's normally grown in the more mountainous areas of Benguet and the Cordillera, where they can presumably plant it on the side of a mountain and just have it run wild without a lot of attention, and then just simply go in and pick the fruits of the harvest. It's something that really is cheap, and it takes on the flavor of whatever it is cooked in. For that reason, you normally see it used in dishes in the Philippines like tinola, where it's got that really delicious chicken stock around it that gives flavor to the sayote and makes it a bit more interesting. It's actually a very good one to stir fry, again, when you're adding in a bit of soy sauce, fish sauce, oyster sauce, so it can just like soak up those flavors, and that additional salt will just make it a lot more palatable than if you would. So I use it in a lot of different ways, but particularly if you're cooking for a lot of people, you can just make ginising gulay, and sayote should definitely be a part of that. So there it is, mga kabano. That is my introduction to the 5 Filipino vegetables I use all the time, that I use more than any other vegetable, and hopefully that gives you a sense for where they come from, how to use them, and what you can cook with them. Now remember, you can check out full episodes of my cooking show where we use and showcase a lot of these vegetables in proper dishes, and of course you can visit maputingcooking.com where we have all of the vlogs and recipes from the show. So I'd love to see you there. Leave a comment below kung anong favorito mong gulay, or maybe what is your least favorite gulay, or whether you eat gulay at all. You know, have I are my comments about the average Filipino diet accurate or not? I think we could all eat a bit more vegetables here in the Philippines. And remember to like us at Facebook as well. We're giving away a bunch of free stuff this year, so you might want to check that out. I'm Chris Urbano, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Ano pupulitan? Papulitin. You'll be harvesting in a kangkong field. You'll be drowning in kangkong. You'll be surrounded by kangkong. So you'll be picking kangkong. Are we still rolling?